was just saying thank you and welcome to everyone. And my name's Ashley, and we have Andrea as well, um, that will be helping with Q&A. Okay, let's get started. So first things first, even before the agenda, I just wanted to make sure that everyone has both the Garden Grant website page as well as our email address. The QR code, if you have your phone handy and you want to scan that, it'll take you directly to the Garden Grant page on the Whole Foods Market Foundation website. That is where you can find so much information, resources, deadlines, links and all kinds of things that are going to be critical for you in the Garden Grant application process. And then the other key thing is our email address. We've tried to make the application process as smooth as possible, but questions inevitably are going to come up that we might not answer in today's call. And so please do note our email address so that you can email us directly with any questions you might have. We do just ask for you to wait a couple business days, I would say up to 3 in busy season for a reply. And that's just because the team is super small. It's myself, Andrea, and a part-time intern who are all wonderful. But with our limited capacity, we do our best to respond to emails as soon as possible. But sometimes that can take us a couple days. So housekeeping, we have a chat function here in this Teams platform. But for all of your questions that are about the Garden Grant, please use the Q&A function. So you should see these options in your menu bar or ribbon. And the chat looks like a chat bubble, but the Q&A has a question mark in it. So the Q&A is where I would love for you guys to go to ask all of your questions. That just helps to keep us organized. And then the chat can be for other things, like if you want to say hi, where you're calling in from, or anything else. And again, this is being recorded. We will be sending out the recording to all attendees, as well as just anyone who registered. We will also be posting the recording link on our website. So you can send this far and wide to any friends, teachers, family members that you know of that might be interested to apply. You'll be able to send this around. Okay, so for the agenda, the intention of today's webinar is mostly about answering your specific questions. I do find that it's really helpful if I give sort of a 15-ish minute kind of overview here at the top where I go over some of the basic grant info, eligibility info, requirements of the grant, the timeline, and then just a few questions that we get every year. And hopefully those are really helpful either as an overview, whether you attended the overview webinar or not. And then after that sort of 15-ish, 20 minutes, we will then open it up for all of your questions. And that's where you can use the Q&A function to begin asking your questions. You won't be able to come off of mute, but if you do have a question that you want to ask verbally, I can try to figure out how to get folks off mute if necessary. So just let us know. Okay, great. So without further ado, I just wanted to ground in the history of this Garden Grant, which I think is really incredible. Since 2012, so we've been doing this Garden Grant for many years. We've invested over $24 million into almost 10,000 schools and orgs. It'll be 10,000 after this year's grant cycle. And that has supported over 6 million children. I think the real number of children is actually much higher. This is probably just undercounted because we only count in the first year that the grant is given. But ideally, these gardens last for many, many years and continue to support children year after year. So this is an incredible program, and I'm really happy that you all are here. Okay, so who do we support? This grant specifically, this Garden Grant supports schools across the US and Canada that are growing edible things in their garden. So that could be, you know, of course you can grow flowers and things that are inedible, but our mission is all around improving children's nutrition. So we love to see that you are growing edible things as well. And you could be using this grant for a brand new garden or for an existing garden. grant at your school. Either is totally fine. We do prioritize applicants encountering barriers to accessing healthy food and nutrition education. And so this is one of the questions that you'll see in our eligibility quiz. And I'll show the kind of a snapshot of the eligibility quiz, but I'll just note that we're not using like a set formula or number to kind of as a rubric for this question specifically. We really leave it broad because we want our applicants to be able to answer this and define in the way that they see fit and fits your population. So this is broadly defined. There is no specific definition here. We do usually receive around 1,000 applications from schools each year. This year we will be funding 850, which is amazing. Super high rate of funding there. A little bit more about eligibility. We are funding schools that serve students in the K through 12 grade range and that have at least 10 students enrolled in garden programming. So a common question here is, can preschools apply, or are preschools eligible? If you have a school that serves preschool in addition to any of the K through 12 grades, then yes, that is applicable. But if you are only a preschool or early care education center, unfortunately, our grant is not applicable, or you're not eligible for this grant. And there are many other wonderful early care education grants offered by other organizations that I hope you can find. But our grant is intended for students in the K through 12 grade range. Schools, in terms of like types of schools that are eligible, there's a lot of different types of schools. So this one can get tricky, but definitely all public schools in the US and Canada are eligible. Private nonprofit schools that are registered as a nonprofit. So in the US, that's 501c3 registration. In Canada, that's called registered Canadian charity. Tribally controlled schools are acceptable or eligible. Bureau of Indian Education schools are eligible. And if you have a specific question, especially around like homeschooling and private schools and 501c3, you can ask us in the chat today. But if it's super like hyper specific to your circumstance, we do invite you to email us just so that we can get all of the information and make sure we answer your question as best we can. The gardens must be on school grounds. So it's totally acceptable for an organization to be working with a school, but we are awarding grants to schools that have gardens on the school grounds rather than, say, on organizational grounds. If it is like right across the street or, you know, very close, like that's an instance where we can work with you and kind of talk about if that's eligible or not. But generally, it's intended to be gardens on school grounds. And then last but not least, as I already said, you must be growing edible food to be eligible for this grant. Okay, so this is a snapshot of the eligibility quiz that you'll see in the application once you have registered in the system and open an application for the garden grant. And I just want to show this because we do get a lot of questions on the eligibility quiz, and so I wanted to preempt some of those. You'll see that these questions are what I just covered content-wise, but I do just want to point out the one in the top right. This is the one where it says we prioritize awarding applicants encountering barriers to accessing healthy food and nutrition education, and then include some examples there. And so the question is, does your school support, work with, or serve communities with a majority of students that are under-resourced? It's a yes or no question. We are not asking for a number or a percentage. And here it's just yes or no. We do give you an opportunity to explain this much further in your own words in the application. If you answer yes to all of these questions and you are eligible, then you'll be prompted to open an application and can provide more info there. So again, like we're not looking for a specific number. We don't have a set definition. This is broadly defined. So, I mean, this could apply to schools that are facing like climate concerns or have dealt with like natural disasters. It could be specifically about food access in the area. It could be a garden for children with disabilities. There's so many ways that this question can be defined. So we keep this as a high level yes, no, and then give you an opportunity to describe your answer further in the application. The last thing I want to call out on eligibility quiz is that you'll want to save draft before you submit. And that's actually true throughout the system. You'll often see two buttons, save draft and submit. You'll always want to save draft first before you submit. Okay. Renewal grants. So this is for folks who have received a garden grant from us before. We do allow and grant up to a lifetime total of 2 garden grants to schools, but we do ask that you wait a year in between. So for example, if you were just awarded a garden grant in 2025, we will ask you to sit this garden grant cycle out, but you can apply again for another grant starting next year. But if you've applied and received a grant in the 2024 cycle or before, then you are likely eligible again for a max of 2 grants for each school. We also ask that every school that reapplies for a grant has completed their progress report so that we can understand how your school has spent the funds and what the program looks like in order to help us in our decision to award a second grant. Um, yeah, okay. And then I just wanted to show this garden grant eligibility flow chart because it's super helpful. This is not the full flow chart. I couldn't fit it all on the slide, but it is linked here and it is linked on our website. And it's just a super helpful resource that's kind of like a decision tree that helps you kind of work through specific instances that apply to your school or situation and help you figure out if you're eligible, and if so, how to apply. Because there's kind of like different ways to apply and different entities to apply under. So this chart or sort of decision tree is really, really helpful. And I highly recommend taking a look here. It also provides like a couple tips and tricks for applying. What are we looking for? So we've kind of covered this already, but just to say again, we're looking for youth involvement in the garden, of course, right? This is all about youth getting involved in the garden, ideally from like the planning stages to harvesting and everything in between. We are looking for that connection to healthy eating. Of course, our mission is all about improving children's nutrition. So we love to see gardens that are doing nutrition lessons, doing cooking demos, tastings, getting kids to try the produce from the garden, and all different ways that you can connect to healthy eating and healthy diets. We also look for garden programming to be integrated into academics. So I've seen gardens be used in everything from English and math class to science class to history. Of course, to garden, there, unique garden classes, art classes. There's so many ways that you can integrate gardens and produce from the garden into various academic subjects throughout the school. Of course, there's also like after school activities or lunch clubs or things like that that can also be ways to further integrate the garden into your school community. We also look for administrative buy-in. So typically this is the principal or sometimes an executive director for like nonprofit private schools. This is super important to us. We want to know that the head of your school is bought into and excited about the garden or the opportunity for a garden. And this is really both about, because like that's critical to being able to host a garden at your school, is you have to have approval. And also it will really speak a lot to kind of the longevity of the garden program. If the head of your school is bought into it and excited about it, then there's a much greater chance for success of your garden program. So that also hits the next point, but that's not the only thing we consider. We look for all different kinds of ways to see if your garden program has a good chance of being sustainable in the long term. And when I'm talking about sustainability, I'm not talking directly about environmental sustainability, but about the longevity of the garden over time or the garden program. So like, in other words, we're looking to fund and grant to schools that their garden program has a great chance of success beyond the initial year of the grant being awarded. And then finally, we look for a thorough and thoughtful garden plan. This does not necessarily mean you have to use a ton of words, and we do have character limits in the application you'll see. So it's not about writing the longest answers. It's about being clear, concise, articulating your ideas and your vision for your garden plan. And it's also not about having all of the garden expertise already. We have tons of applicants that start from having no garden expertise at all, and you are totally welcome. All are welcome. All levels welcome. But so this is really just about making a garden plan that is designed to meet your program where it's at. So if you are newer to gardening, what are ways that you are incorporating learning about gardening into your plan? Or if you are more experienced, then what are ways that you are building, maintaining your garden, or adding new elements or things like that? Okay. The on-hold process. So this is kind of part of the awarding process. And we will let everyone know on August 1st what their status is in terms of you will either be awarded, not awarded, or put on hold. And the on-hold process means that so occasionally we do have funds that become available later in the year. And so initially, if we place you on hold, there's opportunities later in the year sometimes when more funds become available, and we might be able to grant even more grants. If you have been put on hold in the past and were not awarded, we do encourage you to apply again for consideration. And yeah, I think that covers that. Okay. Grant requirements. There is no expiration date for the grant funds, but we do ask you to start spending the grant funds within 1 year of receiving them. We don't specifically ask you to upload receipts to the grant platform, but the grant agreement does ask you to keep receipts on hand for tax purposes for a number of years. I believe it's 6 years. We do ask for a progress report that right now it's set up to be prompted a year after you receive your garden grant. We're actually working on a way of making that timeline more flexible so that you can tell, because there is no expiration date for the funds, we're working on a way so that you can go into the system and say, I have not spent all of the funds. So then it'll prompt you to return at a later date to talk about the progress of your garden after you have, again, garden program after you have spent the funds. Use of the grant funds, and there's just a few more slides here, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So use of the grant funds, this again can be a brand new garden, can be an existing garden, can be any type of garden. We've seen every type from hydroponic, aquaponic, tower gardens, in-ground beds, raised beds, indoor, outdoor, greenhouse, hoop house. Every type of garden that can grow edible food is fair game. And we just encourage you to do what makes sense for your geographic area and your school setting. The funds can be used for educator scholarships or toward a training. So this would be for folks who are looking to like upskill in their garden or garden educator training. We do just ask that you keep that to 30% of the grant funds, which is $1,050. And that's just because we want to make sure that a good portion of the grant funding goes toward the garden itself and the students, and the students are able to benefit from those funds as well. The only three things that we ask you not to spend the funds on are real estate, travel funds, for example, buses, and then field trips. So buses to field trips is something that we do see folks asking if they can use grant funds for, and unfortunately, no, that is not an eligible use of grant funding. Again, this grant is really intended to be supporting the garden that is on school grounds. And so as wonderful as field trips can be, that's just a stipulation of the grant, is to not use these grant funds for field trips, travel to field trips, or for real estate. Okay, this is an overview of the application process. So the application deadline is in about 2 weeks, March 1st. I'll just say if you are having any technical difficulties with the application, or if you are working with us and emailing us and there's some kind of specific reason why you won't be able to make the March 1st deadline, we are happy to work with folks. So we're just email us if you have any issues and we'll work with you. So I just don't want folks to worry too much about that as a hard and fast deadline if you are having issues. Then we go through a couple months of review and due diligence. On my side, my team will be going through and performing due diligence on all the applications. So sometimes we will reach out to you during that period. And that's us making sure that all of the schools are real schools, all of the nonprofits are real registered nonprofits, et cetera. And then the reviews, we're actually reviewing, of course, all of the applications. And then we, in the summer, in June and July, is when we make our selections. And we also work with our additional funders like Newman's Own Foundation to make their selections as well. And we will notify every applicant of the decision, of their award decision on August 1st. Then we give folks about 1 month to sign the Garden Grant Agreement. And then once you've signed that, we will begin shipping out the Garden Grant kits around September. With the sheer volume of kits that we have been doing the last couple years, they will not all ship in September. So that's when we start. And likely it'll be like September, October, and maybe even into November that we'll do that shipping. And it kind of all depends on when you sign your grant agreement. I did want to call out too, this is a picture of what the Garden Grant box looks like. Just because some folks received this and thought it was like marketing trash or something. So if you have been a recipient in the past, you'll recognize this box is what our Garden Grant ships in. And we do include some materials in there in addition to the grant check. Usually we have like a little garden sign, some resources, some curriculum, and different things like that. Okay. Almost done here, folks, and then we'll open it up. So this is a very helpful slide to come back to that is just chock full of resources, and all of these are linked on our website as well. But you can find a copy of our application. So if you're not ready to actually start the app yet, you want to know what's going to be asked of you so that you can go source that info from various folks in the school, download a copy of the application and use that to get info and prepare. We have a paper or PDF of FAQs that are commonly asked. Those are really helpful. Grant writing tips and tricks. If this is your first time ever writing or applying to a grant, don't worry. And there's plenty of tips and tricks available, both there as well as online generally. And then I've also given a webinar on this that is linked on our website as well with the Edible Schoolyard. Berkeley. And then we do have a very short YouTube video that's a Smart Simple tutorial. So that's our grant management platform. That tutorial is super helpful just to give you an overview of how to use Smart Simple and various kind of tips and tricks to use that platform. And then lastly, we have just a ton of garden resources on our website, everything from curriculum to, what's the word for like, coloring pages to, gosh, everything in between. So just tons of resources online. Okay, couple quick, like frequently asked questions. A lot of folks are with an organization that is supporting a school garden. That is wonderful. The applicant itself is the school, not the organization. Organizations can be community partners. They can be fiscal sponsors. They can be both in some cases. But in terms of like who needs to open the application, that entity needs to be the school. Eligibility quiz, we actually already touched on that one. The third bullet is just to say, don't use the back button on your browser. That can kind of get confusing in the application platform, but there should be a back button within the application platform that you can use. Definitely use the eligibility flowchart, which we linked again here. And then the budget, we do get a lot of frequently asked questions about that. So I will just quickly go to, well, actually, I'll just go ahead and finish this now, but I'll say if you do have questions about the budget, I do have a slide on that, so I'm happy to explain that further. I know that can be really confusing. Okay, so I think we've covered these. again, like really that first question about like who should apply or how do you apply, think about where is the garden located? What school grounds is the garden at? And that's the entity that will be opening an application. Please complete all the parts of the application to the best of your ability. And there are plenty of like notes within the app or sort of like guidance or directions within the app. Do check your email junk folders because sometimes the Smart Simple emails will go to your junk folders. I do recommend Chrome as your browser. Other browsers should work for the Garden Grant application, but we find that Chrome is the one that works best. And contact us if you get stuck. So I will just leave us on this page to provide both, again, the link and the QR to the Garden Grant page, as well as our email address for you guys to reach out to us at any time beyond the scope of this webinar. And yeah, I'm just going to leave it at this. And then, so let's open it up for questions. We have 30 minutes. And I'll just ask Andrea if we have questions in the Q&A that we can get started on.
Yes, I have a couple for you.
Awesome.
The first one is, what does it mean when we are registering and it asks how many students are on scholarship or assistance? We have students whose parents are receiving assistance, but I wanted to clarify.
Oh yeah, great question. So I believe this is only asked of Canadian schools, but Andrea, do you know if it's asked of US schools? I just want to make sure I get the answer right.
Um,
We can check,
I'm
but
not sure if it's asked for US schools.
okay. So I'll answer for Canadian schools, I think. So essentially, really what this is about is like we like to get a sense of the schools and the population that attends the schools. And so we, for Canadian schools that don't have what in the US we call FRPL rates, free reduced price lunch rates, we ask for the number or amount of students that are on scholarship so that we can understand sort of the financial need of the student population of your school. So that is sort of what we mean there. How many students are on scholarship in terms of uh, attendance to the school. So actually, I guess this really only applies to private Canadian schools, I believe. But if someone is at a different school that is also having this question, let me know, and then I'll try to answer that in a broader sense.
Okay, and then we have another one. Let me just find it. Is the grant is the grant first come, first serve, or
Mm.
best graded grants?
Yeah, it's not first come, first serve. It is we do award and select like we have a rubric and use our review process to go through grants. So yes, I guess you could say the grants are graded or selected based on our rubric. And really that's it, none of it is a mystery. Like it's all exactly what I presented to you is what we're looking for. And then I'll just say again, we are awarded, we typically get around 1,000 or 900 or 1,000 applications. We will be awarding 850. And that was not always the case. We used to award a lot fewer. And that is due to both, we've been really fortunate to been able to allocate more funding to the Garden Grant, but also we saw that the quality of applications was so high that we made a point to allocate more resources to this grant because we saw so many eligible and amazing applications that we just knew like we need to be awarding more of these. So we are really proud of that really high acceptance rate.
Awesome. And then can the funds be used to hire staff members to work with the children to support the gardening experience / curriculum, either an employee currently with our organization or outside of the school? If so, does the 30% of funds apply to this?
Yeah, great question, Liz. We get this one a lot. So, no, the 30% does not necessarily apply. And yes, that is an eligible use of funds to hire a staff member to work with children on garden or garden programming. What I will say, though, is that we encourage schools to try to seek out more sustainable funding for staff. And the reason there is a few things. One, this grant, as you all know, is, or actually, I don't even think I said that at the top, but this grant is $3,500, which is a wonderful amount of money to start or maintain a garden, but is not necessarily a sustainable amount of money to fund a staff person over time. And so, yes, you can use funds toward this, but ideally you will also be, or additionally, like be looking for other sources of funding to more sustainably be able to supply or fund that position. And then, yeah, I think too, just like generally, we do look at how grantees are budgeting and sort of what you are spending the grant funds on in order to help us determine if your plan feels sustainable for a long-term garden program. Another way of saying that is like if you were to use all $3,500 to fund one staff position for 1 year, I would think, well, I would want to see that garden or that school look for those other sources of funding, because to me, that doesn't feel like a sustainable use of funds over time. So it's acceptable, but I do really encourage you all to look for additional ways to fund staff as well.
Awesome. We have another question. It says, how specific do budgets need to be when it comes to garden materials? I wasn't sure if we needed to itemize the budget or say specific number of bags of soil, trowels for students, etc.
Okay, great. Yes, I'm glad you asked that question because I wanted to show the budget slide and I was having like trouble, but here we go. Yes, okay, perfect. So Andrea, are you guys seeing budget 3 sections slide? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. Yeah, so great question. So I let me before answering your specific question, let me kind of give an overview of the budget, and then I'll come back around to answering your specific question about like how specific do you need to get. So the budget part of the grant application has 3 sections, and this can get confusing for folks. So I wanted to just like very directly explain what those different sections are. So, oh, whoops. Okay, there we go. So the first section is annual garden expenses. What we're looking for here is the full picture of what it costs to maintain your garden in any given year. So this could be well above and beyond $3,500. It could be less than 3,500. It could be just a totally different amount, because this is not just how we're using the grant funds. It's how much does it cost to maintain your garden program in a year. This helps us get the full picture of your garden program, and it helps us understand what role the grant that we are offering plays in the scope of your full budget. So an example might be, let's see, we say, please provide, and I did add some examples this year into the garden grant application because a lot of folks were asking for that. So hopefully that is helpful. So please provide a list of expenses and costs. So examples can be labor. So whether you have a school garden coordinator position or a teacher, school garden teacher, tools that you have to buy every year. A lot of tools, of course, you don't have to buy every year, but maybe seeds would be something that you need to buy every year, or curriculum, or utilities. If the garden is responsible for paying the water bill, a lot of times, of course, that's, managed by the district or by the grounds keepers. But we have seen cases where the garden program is on the hook for paying the water bill. So that's something I would definitely encourage you to include in your annual garden expenses so that we can understand the full scope of how much it costs to maintain your garden. And then, and in terms of just like how you will fill this out, all you can see here is the buttons, but you'll click that green button for each of these 3 sections, and then it'll open up a window where you will enter, for example, water, the amount, seeds and the amount, and you'll list things that way. So I guess I'll say there to the original question of like how specific should you get, definitely don't feel the need to write out like every single individual seed packet or something. That would be far too much specificity. So I would say I love to see items or groups of items, but it does not have to, we definitely don't need to see like brands or exact like Okay, I'll just give an example. So for seeds, and rather than listing like, okay, the 10 watermelon seed packets and 5 corn, whatever, you can just say seeds, $300. That would be plenty of specificity. But if you do just have like, for example, I will see some folks say just like supplies. I would like you to get a little bit more specific there. Are we talking about trowels, shovels? Gloves? Are we talking about clipboards, outdoor classroom, things like seats or tables or something? So I would say get more specific than supplies, but you don't have to get as specific as to tell me exactly every single item you want to purchase. Hopefully that's clear. But if you have more questions around how specific to be, feel free to throw that again in the Q&A and I'll address it further. So then to go back to the main 3 budget sections, so we went over the first one, the annual garden expenses. The second is grant funding allocation. So this is where you will tell us how you will or would like to spend the $3,500 grant funds. So this is where you will list out everything that you intend to spend these funds on. Again, there is no expiration date. So it could be the case that you use all $3,500 in 1 year. Or it could be the case that you allocate, say, $2,000 to use this year to maybe purchase a greenhouse or upgrade your raised beds or something. But then you might say, like, for $1,050 for the rest of the grant funds, you might say, or 1,500, sorry. You might say, we want to use $300 a year for the next 5 years or something, to be able to fund our fund our garden program year over year. So please feel free to like go into the future with this grant funding allocation, and because you don't have to spend all of the funds in 1 year. Okay. And again, I did provide some examples there in the grant application itself. Projected garden revenue. So this section of the budget is where we're asking you to tell us what funds you may have incoming to your garden program. Now, not every garden program has revenue expected, and that's okay. We do ask for every section to be filled out. So if you don't have anything here, still enter click that green button and enter we don't have any revenue. But we do encourage you to seek other sources of revenue. So whether that is other grants, other donations, maybe it's parent donations, or maybe it's a bake sale, or perhaps it is working with your school district to unlock funding for healthy food education. There's all different ways that gardens and schools find ways to unlock funds. And there's also a whole part of our website resources page where we give lots of examples for other places to look for revenue for your garden program. Or for funds. But so this is where you'll list that here. So say, for example, you are at a garden program where you have been awarded a grant from Annie's brand to also help with the garden. So you could say, Annie's grant granted in 2025, whatever, and it's this amount of money. And then maybe you would say, like, we're going to have $100 routed from the parent-teacher organization that was donations or whatever that we'll be able to use toward the grant program. So that's what you're listing here. It's not costs, it's not expenses, it's revenue. What do you have incoming that is going to supplement the $3,500 that this grant would represent? Okay, I think that's a pretty good overview of the budget, but again, any further more specific questions, go ahead and ask that again in the Q&A. All right, what else do we have, Andrea?
I think that was most of the questions, and you answered a lot of them during the presentation.
Oh, awesome. Okay, great. Oh, I will say I'm actually surprised we haven't gotten this question yet, so I'll just go ahead and tip this one off, and then please feel free to put in the chat, or sorry, the Q&A, any other questions as if you have any additional ones. So a common question we get is, can I apply for every school in the district? Or I'm in a district where this school, the middle school got a grant, but I haven't had one yet. Am I eligible? So to answer those questions in a high level sense, we look at every school individually in terms of eligibility. So we're not looking at entire districts. We are looking at each individual school. Another way of saying that is, yes, we were, as long as your school is eligible, meets all the eligibility criteria that we've discussed, we could award to potentially every single school in a school district. There's no limit to how many schools in a district we can award to because we consider each one individually. Another common question I will just say too, actually, I'll add one more thing to that, which is that if you are, say, at the district level, you would not be able to apply for all the schools with one application. We're considering eligibility individually. We also consider and accept applications per school. So we do need to see an application for each school. We need to see approval from each school, et cetera. And that's really because, like, as wonderful as it would be to work on the entire district level, each school's, excuse me, needs are sometimes unique to the school, whether that's, the site-specific needs of what, area you're working with to have the garden, or, there's all different ways that garden programs are unique to individual school sites. And so we do want to see an application from every school within a district. I just wanted to also add about organization. So if you're at or working with an organization that is supporting your school garden, that is wonderful. And organizations often want to help support schools by taking some of the burden off and applying for the grant for them. That is acceptable, but if you are doing that, you still need to apply. The entity needs to be the school. And I know that can be confusing for folks if you're like, well, I'm in an org. So definitely email us if you have questions. But if you are, like have not created anything yet in Smart Simple, not registered in Smart Simple, what you're going to do is you're going to register the school first, and that's the entity that's applying. Later, you'll get an opportunity to tell us about the organization and whether or not that organization is going to be the fiscal sponsor or the community partner or whatever. So hopefully that helps out with that question.
We have another
Mhm.
question.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if we can engage local Whole Foods employees to volunteer with our gardens.
Oh my gosh, that is such a cool question. And yes, I love that idea. I think that one day we would love to have a more coordinated program where we could encourage that among our garden sites. Right now, the team is super small, myself and Andrea, and so we wouldn't be able to necessarily like coordinate that on your behalf. But if you want to reach out to a Whole Foods store, if you have one in your area, by all means. And I hope and think that you'll find a lot of eager and excited folks that would love to help volunteer in your school garden. And I'll just add too, if in case anyone heard that and thought, wait, I don't have a Whole Foods in my area, does that mean I'm not eligible? No, we grant to schools all over the US and Canada, whether or not you have a Whole Foods nearby. But if you do have a Whole Foods nearby and want to reach out to them for volunteering or just to have them visit your garden, I think you'll find that a lot of folks would be excited to do that. And tell us about it. Maybe email us and let us know so that we can hear about the cool stuff you guys do. I see a question just 2 minutes ago. I'll go ahead and answer this one. Can we work in the grant application in the platform, the Smart Simple platform, save along the way and return to it? Yes. And we very much encourage you to do so. You might be able to fill out the application all in one go, but typically folks need to kind of return back to it. It's not super quick. So, and it does ask for a signed letter from your principal. It asks for photos. So absolutely save draft and come back to it. You'll be able to come back anytime until the deadline, and by just logging into your account and then opening the grant that you have in draft. And so definitely encourage folks to do that. Or should we have everything ready to go so you can submit all at once? No, definitely save and come back to it. I would be like surprised and impressed if you could do this all in one sitting, but um, let's see. I'm just reading through. Oh, I think I saw something come into the chat. Oh, it looks like Andrea got that question. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. Andrea, do you think we've hit everything in the Q&A?
I think we have.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Wow. Well, we'll stick around for a few more minutes if folks still have more questions that come up, and go ahead and put those in the Q&A. And if not, then thank you so much for joining. We will send the recording of this webinar out. And thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for joining. And have a great rest of your day, folks. We'll stick around for a few more minutes if folks do have some more questions and keep monitoring the chat. Thank you, Lindsay. Thanks, Liz. Scoring. Oh yeah, cool. Okay, so Tiara just asked about the scoring. Yeah, so um let's see. I don't think I have a slide that goes over the elements, but I can just sort of verbally kind of explain how that works. So we score applications based on five main areas. Those areas are, let's see if I can get it all from memory. Vision or goal. So understanding really just like what are you doing with this garden program, the garden itself, and the garden grant funding. What is your vision and what are your goals? That's one. Two is student engagement and how the garden and garden program are integrated throughout your school and throughout your academics. So if you're in one class or five classes or in an after-school club or things like that, and how often are the kids getting to go to the garden, things like that. That's two. Three is community engagement. How are you engaging and bringing in the broader community into your garden and garden grant program? Do you have volunteer hours or volunteer, days or programs? Do you have a newsletter about the garden that you send out to parents? Are you regularly engaging different folks in the community, maybe for not only volunteer help, but maybe support like in-kind support? A lot of times I see like school gardens reach out to local like garden supply stores and have really wonderful partnerships that way. So there's like a million ways you could engage your community. So that's that one is three is engagement, community engagement. Four is, did I skip one? Andrea, feel free to chime in if you, I know the last one is sustainability, but I'm like, what did I miss? Oh, need. Need, that's four actually. Yeah. So need in terms of what is the economic or like food access needs of the student population or the community that your garden is serving. So a lot of what we look for in the US is both your answer to that question that I hit on earlier, that eligibility question of like what needs is your student population facing. So that's an area for you to explain that to us. And another thing we look at in the US is FRPL, free reduced price lunch rates. In Canada, we look for scholarship rates to private schools, etc. And then five, the fifth category is sustainability or longevity. And so that's really like, what are you doing to make sure that your garden grant, or sorry, that your garden program is going to last beyond the scope of this grant? So for example, do you have a committee that's going to help oversee the grant year over year? Do you have other sources of funding that help your garden program remain sustainable year over year? Well, what else? Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. There's plenty of different ways, but yeah, so those are the five main categories. Hopefully that was helpful, Tiara. Can we purchase a machine to dehydrate food that we grow? Yes, I would say if you're using a machine to dehydrate food that you will be serving to students, whether that's for cooking demos or tastings or nutritional lessons, Yes, I think that's awesome. And dehydrating food can be a really wonderful way to like have garden produce last for a longer time, of course, right? So yeah, I think that's awesome and can be a really wonderful addition to a garden program or a cooking program. Thanks, Tiara. All right. Well, unless there's any further questions, we'll maybe stay on for another minute here. But if not, then we will let you all go about your merry day. A freeze dryer. Oh, yeah, I guess I was thinking dehydrator. I don't know what a freeze dryer is, but that sounds cool too. Yeah, I think really like it's not so much about like the specific technology. It's like if you're using if you want to use grant funds to purchase something that helps your students be able to taste produce from the garden. Yes, I would say absolutely. Thanks, Michael. Just put this slide back up in case anyone needs that. Thanks, Leanne. Farm animals. Yeah, yeah. So someone's asking if the grant funds can be used to bring farm animals into the garden. Yes, I would say a couple of things. Like, first of all, definitely you would need buy-in from the head of school. And sometimes, of course, this is like, regionally specific or, specific to the school, but you would just want to make sure that you have the right sort of permissions or sometimes permits to be able to host animals on your school garden site. But yes, we do see this very successfully happening in a lot of garden programs, especially chickens, I would say is the most common, but other farm animals as well. And so I would say key things to consider are permission, permits, sometimes if needed, and then of course like food safety is a key concern, and you want to make sure that you have someone managing the garden program that is well equipped in the area of food safety so that you're making sure that no contamination gets onto the like produce that children will be eating. And then what else do I want to say about that? Yeah, I would say that the we still do have like the primary focus for this grant of supporting improving children's nutrition and growing edible food. So of course, like chickens that grow or lay eggs, like that can be a wonderful addition to a school garden program. If it's farm animals that are not for like the purposes of eating the produce or the animal, I would say that that would be like a little bit like less applicable. But any specific questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us. But yeah, we've seen a lot of successful integration of animals into school gardens. Okay, awesome. Andrea, anything else before we head out?
No, I think we got
Okay,
all the
cool.
questions.
Perfect. Thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day.